How long is the longest sleep you've ever had? 10 hours? 15 hours? How would you feel if you had slept for 300 years? Yes, there were indeed people who slept for 300 years. We're going to talk about a group of young believers, the Ashâb-ı-Kehf companions of the cave, who were unaware of each other at first, but eventually came together through faith. The story of the Ashâb-ı-Kehf is one that almost everyone has either heard from their elders or come across at some point. However, most of us remember the Ashâb-ı-Kehf as simply the 7 sleepers who slept for centuries. In reality, we don't know exactly how many there were, and the important takeaway from this event is not their number, but something else. Who were these young men? Why did they flee from their society? Why were they put to sleep for 300 years? And what happened to them that made their story important enough to be mentioned in the Quran? Let's dive into the story of Ashâb-ı-Kehf in the light of Islamic and other sources. It was a time before the advent of Islam, a time when Christianity had not yet been completely corrupted. There were still true Christians, believers in the oneness of God. However, the Roman Empire that time was steeped in idolatry. Not only did they believe in it, but they also exerted immense efforts to force those who rejected idolatry and embraced Christianity back into their former religion. Those who refused to return were punished with excruciating deaths. For instance, they were crucified and condemned to death by fire. Most of the believers were from the poor and weak segments of society, but there were also people of high status whose nature had not been corrupted and whose souls were elevated. Among them were the Ashâb-ı-Kehf, also known as the 7 sleepers. These young men held significant positions in the Roman Empire. They had believed, but they kept their faith hidden. As they witnessed the oppression against the believers, each day became more unbearable for them. Each lash against the believers inflicted a deep wound in their own hearts. They wanted to take action, but what could they do? These young men had all come to faith at different times and without knowing one another as much as possible. During the Roman rituals of sacrifice to idols, they would quietly slip away, unnoticed by others. One day, the city was abuzz with anxiety. The reason? The Roman emperor was due to visit the city. To prepare for his visit, the Roman governor intensified the persecution against Christians, aiming to ensure that no one who rejected the idols would remain by the time the emperor arrived. Yet, there were some within their very ranks whom they had overlooked. God had concealed the faith of these young men from the Roman governor until the appointed time, much like he had hidden the prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, from the eyes of the Quraysh when they sought to kill him in the cave. The day of the emperor's arrival finally came. The city's elite bowed before him, pledging their allegiance. When it came time for one of the Ashâb-ı-Kehf to present himself, he decided that the time had come to proclaim the truth. With great courage and with the strength that God placed in his heart, he boldly declared his faith before the emperor. The brave words of this young man emboldened the others, and they all came forward, openly proclaiming their belief in front of the Roman elite. The emperor was humiliated by their boldness, and those around him called for their execution. However, the emperor knew that killing these young men would only turn them into martyrs and spread their story throughout the empire. The last thing he wanted was for them to become heroes, so he gave them 3 days to renounce their faith. Despite the torture and torment, nothing could sway these young men from their beliefs. They eventually found a way to flee the city and sought refuge in a cave, along with a dog named Gitmir, believed to be in a place called Mount Ancellus. Those who attempted to enter the cave were struck with fear and fled in terror. For 300 years, they remained in the cave, as described in the verses of Surah Al-Kehf in the Quran. When they finally awoke, the Ashâb-ı-Kehf sensed that something was not right. They wondered how long they had slept. One of them guessed a day or part of a day, unaware that centuries had passed. Hungry after their long sleep, they sent one of their number to the city to secretly and carefully buy food. However, upon entering the city, this young man noticed something strange. He thought only a few days had passed, but the city had completely changed. The temples had been replaced by churches, and there were no more idols. The people spoke of only one creator. What they had stood up for centuries ago had now become the reality. No longer did people worship idols. Now faith in one God was openly practiced, and idol worship was considered shameful. The young man, still shocked by the changes, went to a bakery to buy bread. When he handed over a coin to pay, the baker thought he had found a treasure, for the coin was centuries old. The baker quickly reported this to the authorities. It was then that the young man realized the truth. They had not been asleep for a single day, but for centuries. God's purpose in keeping them asleep for so long was profound. The people of that time were debating the possibility of resurrection, and this miraculous event proved that God could revive the dead. After centuries, after this realization, the Ashâb-ı-Kehf returned to their cave and prayed to their Lord, asking to be put back into a peaceful sleep until the day of judgment. The people flocked to the cave to see them, and a place of worship was built over their resting place. The story of the Ashâb-ı-Kehf shows us the power of faith and patience. They had no doubt that truth would prevail, just as the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, did during the conquest of Mecca, when the idols were destroyed and the call to truth echoed from the Kaaba. The Ashâb-ı-Kehf's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how bleak the world may seem, we should never lose hope. Faith will always triumph in the end, and God's light will always be completed, whether through us or without us. Dear listeners, as I have mentioned in my other videos, all these teachings are derived from authentic Islamic sources and hadiths. I have not added any of my personal interpretations. You are welcome to research this further yourselves. Take care of yourselves, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel.